The silence of deep space had long been Commander Elias Frost's most faithful companion. 6 months into his 18-month rotation aboard research station Artemis, orbiting Jupiter's moon Europa, he had grown accustomed to the quiet hum of machinery and the occasional static-filled transmission from Earth control. Elias ran his hand through his dark, close-cropped hair as he monitored the atmospheric readings on Europa's surface. At 42, he was considered a veteran among the aerospace community, having devoted 20 years to pushing the boundaries of human exploration. The solitary nature of this mission suited him. After 2 failed marriages, he'd come to prefer the predictable company of stars and scientific data. The emergency proximity alarm shattered his concentration. "Unidentified vessel approaching," announced the AI system. "Impact trajectory detected." Elias' fingers flew across the control panel. "Display visual." The monitor revealed a small craft, unlike any human design he'd encountered, tumbling erratically toward the station. Its sleek, curved hull shimmered with an iridescent material that seemed to pulse with internal light. "Initiating emergency docking protocols," Elias commanded, heart racing as he prepared for the first confirmed extraterrestrial contact in human history. The alien vessel locked onto the station's auxiliary airlock with surprising precision despite its apparent damage. Grabbing an oxygen mask and sidearm, Elias approached the airlock with cautious determination. The outer door of the foreign craft hissed open, releasing a cloud of vapor that smelled faintly of cinnamon and ozone. Through the mist emerged a figure that took Elias' breath away. For despite the alienness, his mind immediately registered the being as female, stood nearly 7 feet tall. Her slender frame was covered in silver-green skin that reflected the station's lights like polished jade. Most striking was her hair, thick crimson curls that seemed to move with a life of their own, coiling and stretching as if responding to unseen currents. Her large, almond-shaped eyes locked onto his, irises the color of amber with vertical pupils that contracted sharply at the sight of him. She wore what appeared to be a form-fitting suit composed of living plant matter interwoven with technology. "Stay back," Elias warned, raising his hand in what he hoped was a universal gesture of caution. The alien spoke, her voice melodic but clearly strained. The translation device at her throat flickered, then produced halting English. "Life support, failing, need, assistance." She swayed dangerously, revealing a deep gash along her side where silvery fluid seeped between woven plant fibers. Against all protocol, Elias holstered his weapon and stepped forward to catch her as she collapsed. Her weight surprised him. She was lighter than her height suggested, as if her bones were hollow. "I'm Commander Elias Frost," he said, supporting her toward the medical bay. "You're on Research Station Artemis, a human facility." "Vexalia," she managed, her translator struggling. "Botanical, researcher of Signin Collective." Her amber eyes studied his face with a mixture of fear and fascination. "Never thought first contact with humans would be like this." "Me neither," Elias admitted, feeling the strange texture of her skin against his arms, warm and smooth like polished stone, yet subtly yielding like living tissue. As he helped her onto the examination table, their eyes met again. Something unspoken passed between them. 2 beings, alone in the vastness of space, from worlds unimaginably different yet bound by a sudden, unexpected dependency. "I will help you," Elias promised, surprised by the conviction in his own voice. "Whatever you need." Vexalia's crimson curls rippled in what might have been acknowledgement as her translator hummed with her response. "Perhaps humans are not as the stories say." As Elias gathered medical supplies, he wondered what stories her people told about his kind, and whether the unprecedented encounter before him would rewrite them all. 3 days had passed since Vexalia's unexpected arrival, and Elias found himself constantly distracted by her presence. The medical bay had been converted into temporary quarters for the Signin botanist, filled with various plant specimens she had salvaged from her damaged ship. "Your technology is primitive," Vex observed, examining the station's life support systems with delicate 6-fingered hands, "but impressively resilient." Elias smiled, no longer offended by her direct manner. "We make do with what we have. Not all species can grow their technology like yours." Vex's crimson curls shifted slightly, a gesture he'd come to recognize as amusement. Her wounds were healing rapidly, the silver-green skin knitting together through a process she called photosynthetic regeneration. "My ship's biomatrix is beyond your repair capabilities," she stated, her amber eyes meeting his. "But perhaps together we can devise an alternative." They began working side by side, Elias providing Earth materials while Vex adapted her Signan knowledge to make them compatible. She explained that her people had evolved on a planet with minimal metal resources, forcing them to develop biotechnology that merged plant life with consciousness. "The plants of your world," Vex commented as she manipulated a section of living circuitry, "they speak, but you cannot hear them." "And what do they say?" Elias asked, fascinated by the way her fingers seemed to communicate with the plant material. "They sing of sunlight and soil," she replied softly, "of cycles and seasons, not unlike your human poetry." As they worked, Elias taught her Earth customs, the handshake, which she found amusingly formal, the concept of music purely for pleasure rather than communication, the strange human habit of consuming food for taste rather than just sustenance. The proximity alert interrupted their growing camaraderie. "Solar flare incoming," Elias announced, checking the readings. "Class X9, we need to move to the radiation shelter." The station's shelter was designed for one occupant. The small space forced them to sit shoulder to shoulder as the first waves of radiation washed over the station, causing the lights to flicker. "Your body temperature is elevated," Vex noted, her shoulder pressed against his in the darkness. "It's warm in here," Elias lied, acutely aware of the faint phosphorescent glow her skin emitted in the dim light. "Humans are poor deceivers," she said, her voice taking on a musical quality he hadn't heard before. "Your physiological responses betray you." In the blue-green light emanating from her skin, Elias saw her studying him with undisguised curiosity. Her crimson curls had relaxed, cascading down her shoulders like liquid fire. "On Cygna we communicate truth through contact," she said, slowly raising her hand. Elias remained still as her fingers gently touched his temple. A sensation like warm honey spreading through his thoughts followed, not invasive, but intimate in a way he'd never experienced. "Your mind is beautifully complex," Vex whispered, "full of loneliness and wonder." "And yours?" Elias asked, breathless. "Curious, exiled, hopeful." Each word seemed to carry layers of meaning beyond the translator's capacity. When the radiation warning finally ended, neither moved immediately. Something had changed between them, a bridge across the vast gulf of their different origins. "We should return to the repairs," Vex finally said, her hand dropping reluctantly from his face. As they exited the shelter, Elias noticed her crimson curls had interwoven with patterns he hadn't seen before, complex spirals that seemed to pulse with an inner light. He wondered what that might mean in Signan body language, and why the thought made his heart race. "The crystals we need should be abundant in this asteroid field," Vex explained, as Elias piloted the research shuttle through the debris. Her translator had improved dramatically after she had integrated some of her ship's technology with it, giving her voice a melodious quality that Elias found increasingly captivating. "Xenosilicate formations are rare on Earth," he replied, maneuvering between two slowly rotating asteroids. "We've only synthesized them in laboratories." Vex stood behind his seat, her height allowing her to easily see over him. The proximity of her was distracting, her scent like cinnamon and fresh earth after rain, her crimson curls occasionally brushing his shoulder as the shuttle changed direction. "There," she pointed, her slender arm extending past his face. "That asteroid with the bluish hue." As they approached, Elias noticed unusual formations crystallizing across the asteroid's surface, structures too regular to be natural. "Are those growing?" he asked, adjusting the view screen. "Yes, xenosilicates respond to nearby biological life," Vex explained. "They're semi-sentient minerals. On Cygna, we consider them distant cousins to plants." The shuttle's sensors suddenly blared a warning. Elias' eyes widened as he registered the readings. "Meteor shower incoming. High velocity directly in our path." Vex moved with surprising speed, sliding into the co-pilot's seat. "Your thrusters cannot outrun them. Allow me." Before Elias could object, her fingers interfaced with the control panel. The living circuitry she had integrated into the shuttle's systems weeks earlier pulsed with bioluminescent light. The shuttle shuddered, then moved with a grace it had never possessed under human control alone. "What are you doing?" Elias asked, watching as she seemed to communicate directly with the vessel. "Dancing," Vex replied, her amber eyes focused intently on the approaching meteors. "Like the wind gliders of my world who navigate storm currents." The shuttle wove through the meteor shower in an intricate pattern that defied conventional piloting techniques. Elias found himself mesmerized by Vex's movements, her body swaying slightly, her crimson curls floating like flames as the artificial gravity fluctuated with their rapid course changes. When they finally emerged from the meteor field, Elias released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "That was incredible," he admitted. Vex's silver-green skin flushed slightly darker around her cheeks, her species equivalent of a blush, he had learned. "Among my people I was considered clumsy," she confessed. "A poor navigator, it is why I chose botanical research instead of piloting." Elias laughed, the tension breaking. "Then I'm definitely never challenging a Cygnon pilot to a race." They collected the xenosilicate crystals in comfortable silence, working together with the efficiency that comes from growing familiarity. Elias noted how easily they anticipated each other's movements now, a harmony that transcended their biological differences. As they prepared to return to the station, a particularly large crystal caught Vex's attention. She carefully harvested it, then hesitated before placing it in Elias' palm. "On Cygna, these are given as tokens of appreciation," she said, her translator momentarily struggling with the concept. The crystal was warm against his skin, pulsing faintly in time with his heartbeat. "Friendship," Elias suggested. Vex's curls rippled in that now familiar gesture of amusement. "A beginning word for a complex feeling," she replied cryptically. As they returned to the station, the crystal in Elias' pocket seemed to grow warmer whenever Vex was near, as if responding to an unspoken connection between them that neither was quite ready to name. "The final connections are complete," Vex announced, her fingers withdrawing from the living circuitry of her repaired vessel. After 6 weeks of work, the ship's biomatrix had been successfully integrated with the Earth materials Elias had provided. "You'll be able to reach your homeworld now?" Elias asked, trying to keep his voice neutral despite the hollowness expanding in his chest. Vex's amber eyes studied him. Over their time together, he had learned to read her expressions despite their alien nature. The subtle shifts in her vertical pupils, the changing patterns in her crimson curls that reflected her emotional state. "Yes," she confirmed, "the ship can now sustain interstellar travel." The silence between them grew heavy with unspoken thoughts. Outside the viewport, Jupiter's immense presence filled the sky, its swirling storms mirroring the turbulence Elias felt within. "I've received a transmission from Earth Control," he said finally. "They're curious about you. Scientists are preparing questions. Military advisors want threat assessments." Vex's curls tightened slightly, a sign of distress he had come to recognize. "And what have you told them?" she asked. "Nothing yet," Elias admitted. "I wanted to speak with you first." They moved to the observation deck, their favorite place on the station. The vast panorama of stars had become the backdrop to their deepening connection. Hours spent sharing stories of their worlds, teaching each other their native languages beyond what the translator could convey, discovering the surprising commonalities despite their different origins. "On Cygna," Vex began, her voice lower than usual, "there are ancient laws against interspecies bonding. Our elders believe it dilutes our connection to the planetary consciousness." Elias nodded slowly, understanding the implication. "On Earth, there would be those who would see you as a specimen to study, not a person to know." "Is that how you see me?" Vex asked, her gaze intense. "No," Elias said simply, "not for a long time now." He reached into his pocket, withdrawing the xenosilicate crystal she had given him. It glowed brilliantly now, responsive to both their presences. "It's grown," Vex observed, surprise evident in her voice. "I've been keeping it with me," Elias confessed. "It seems to respond to my thoughts of you." Vex's hand covered his, her 6 fingers interlacing with his 5. The crystal pulsed between their palms, casting prismatic light across their faces. "Xenosilicates respond to emotional resonance," she explained softly. "This growth pattern is rare. It suggests a harmony between us that transcends biological differences. Elias stepped closer, his free hand carefully touching one of her crimson curls. It coiled gently around his finger, a sensation both alien and intimately familiar. "What happens now?" he asked. Vex's silver-green skin illuminated with bioluminescent patterns he had never seen before, complex constellations that seemed to map the depth of her feelings. "I do not know," she admitted. "I only know that leaving feels incorrect." Beneath the canopy of stars, their lips met, an Earth custom Vex had been curious about. The contact sent waves of sensation unlike anything either had experienced, the xenosilicate crystal between their joined hands pulsing with increasing intensity as biological barriers gave way to something deeper. When they finally separated, both understood that whatever path lay ahead, they would face it fundamentally changed by each other. The distress signal arrived without warning, piercing the quiet routine they had established. Vex's translation device decoded it instantly, a Signan emergency beacon from a research vessel lost in the outer reaches of Jupiter's influence. "My people," Vex whispered, her crimson curls contracting tightly against her scalp, the most extreme display of distress Elias had witnessed from her. "They are stranded, dying." Elias didn't hesitate. "We'll take your ship, it's faster than anything I have." As they prepared for departure, reality intruded on the sanctuary they had created. Elias downloaded his research data, recorded a final message to Earth Control explaining his decision, and gathered the few personal possessions that mattered to him. "Your world will consider this desertion," Vex observed as she initialized her ship's living systems. "Probably," Elias agreed, securing the xenosilicate crystal, now grown into an intricate formation in a specially designed container. "They might also consider it first contact diplomacy. Either way, I've made my choice." The Signan vessel responded eagerly to Vex's commands, its biomatrix recognizing its creator despite the modifications. As the airlock sealed, Elias felt a momentary pang for the life he was leaving behind. 20 years of service to humanity's space program, colleagues who respected him, the familiar comforts of Earth culture. But as Vex's hand found his, the xenosilicate crystal between them pulsing with shared emotion, those regrets diminished against the vastness of what lay ahead. The rescue operation proved challenging but successful. The stranded Signans, 3 botanical researchers who had been charting Jupiter's moons for plant-compatible environments, were initially wary of Elias. Their translators struggled with human speech patterns, and their crimson curls displayed patterns of suspicion and confusion. "He is honored ally," Vex explained in the complex tonal language of her people, her curls forming elaborate patterns that Elias had begun to recognize as formal declarations. "Life bound to me through resonance." The concept clearly shocked them, but survival needs outweighed cultural taboos. As they journeyed toward Signan space, Elias worked alongside them, his human adaptability proving unexpectedly valuable to their botanical experiments. "Your people will not easily accept this," one of the researchers told him during the long voyage. "The Signan collective has avoided contact with non-photosynthetic species for millennia. Change begins with individuals brave enough to live it," Elias replied, quoting a Signan proverb Vex had taught him. The night before they would reach Signan space, Vex found Elias in the ship's arboretum, a living chamber where Earth plants he had brought from the station now grew alongside Signan specimens. "Are you certain of this path?" she asked, her silver-green hands gently tending a small Earth rose that had begun to exhibit unusual phosphorescent properties from exposure to Signan soil. Elias looked at their creation, a hybrid garden neither world had seen before. "I've spent my life exploring boundaries," he said. "First Earth's, then the solar systems. This is just the next frontier." Vex's curls relaxed into the flowing pattern he had come to recognize as contentment. "The collective will assign observers to study our bond. We will be specimens, in a sense." "Or pioneers," Elias suggested, taking her hand. The xenosilicate crystal they kept between them had grown into a complex structure that resembled both Earth and Signan mathematical patterns intertwined, a physical manifestation of their connection. "My world has a saying," he continued, "nothing ventured, nothing gained." Vex's translator hummed as she considered this. The Cygnon equivalent would be new growth requires disturbed soil. As the ship approached the shimmering nebula that marked the entrance to Cygnon space, they stood together at the viewport. Ahead lay uncertainty, prejudice, discovery, and wonder, the eternal companions of those who dare to cross boundaries. "Ready?" Elias asked. Vex's crimson curls intertwined with his fingers, as her silver-green skin illuminated with patterns that spoke of courage and hope. "Together," she answered, as they prepared to face a universe that had never before witnessed what they had become. Not quite human, not quite Cygnon, but something entirely new between the stars.